Welcome to the Veterinary Financial Podcast, where we discuss financial freedom and professional success. I'm Meredith Jones, a veterinarian and financial planner for vets.
I'm David Aizuss. I'm also a financial planner for vets.
So I wanted to talk about some data from the AVMA Business and Economic Forum that I attended in October. So it was virtual this year. Sometimes it has been in person in the past. It's a great conference to attend if you're a money nerd like me, or if you have any interest in getting information about the new grad data. There is also an annual report that the AVMA puts out called the Economic State of the Profession. There's a lot of data in that report on compensation. So that's something that might interest everybody, even if they're not a money nerd. And they actually do a breakdown for different types of vets. And so that's just some information about what sort of things the AVMA collects data on. But there are a lot of new data points related to recent grads and new grads. And there's one particular point that I found really interesting, which is that new graduate veterinarians are working more than they expected. So when you get into the actual data and look at the difference in how many hours new grad vets thought they would be working on a weekly basis versus how much they're actually working, 2022 grads, for example, they thought they would be working about 43 hours a week, and they're actually working about 48 hours a week. Then when they surveyed the 2023 grads, they thought they'd be working something more like 41, 42 hours a week. And it remains to be seen from future surveys how many hours a week they actually ended up working. I thought that was really interesting because we're talking about a difference from they thought they were going to work 43 hours a week. They're actually working 48 hours a week. That's an extra 5 hours a week, which on the surface might not sound like much, right? Because 5 hours a week, okay, it can be a lot, but maybe it's not that bad. But then if you do the math over the course of a year and you take 5 hours a week, let's say you work 50 weeks out of the year, that's 250 extra work hours per year. Then if you divide that by 40 hours a week, that's like you're being asked to work 6 additional 40-hour work weeks per year. David, what do you think about that?
That's a lot. Hence why we wanted to do this pod to talk about that. 6 extra weeks a year of your life. Most people take 2 weeks off here for like a nice vacation. Imagine getting back a month and a half of just whatever you want to do. That's insane. What do I think about all this? Here's my thesis behind at least maybe the why behind this might be happening and why the shift basically post 2017, especially post 2019 of, expectations versus reality not matching up in the opposite direction of what it used to be. I think, and this is not just for the vet profession, but you'll see where I'm going with this. The 40-hour work week hasn't really made sense for a while now, in my opinion. And the more we have technological advances, the more that is the case. But even outside of the technological advances that we've had over the last 20 years, what are the odds that a janitor versus a veterinarian versus a dentist versus an attorney versus a financial planner versus you name it, what are the odds that all of those different types of things have the exact same amount of work to be done every single week? That's nonsense. That doesn't make any sense. And so even one vet versus the other vet might have a different workload, let alone the different professions out there. So I think over time, the work week is becoming less standardized. And with that, with newer generations there, including my own, I'm a millennial, there is more of an expectation of work-life balance. Mm-hmm. There's more of an expectation of freedom and, you're not just working because you have to, but working because you want to and more efficiently, which is good. And again, I thought the 40-hour work week didn't make sense when I was 10, I was like, that just literally doesn't make any sense. And so I think a lot of vets are coming out of vet school with that kind of subconscious thing in the back of their head. I could be wrong. This is just my thesis of where this is happening, but newer generations are becoming more and more that in the back of their head. That could lead to expecting to work less. Meanwhile, what has actually happened in the vet profession, especially since COVID, demand has gone through the roof. Medicine has gotten better over time. That also means there's more to learn, too. And so, with changing demand for more demand for vet medicine, and we're continuing to go to a place where, especially on the small animal side, it's more so treating the animal like a human, more so treating it like that owner's baby. And with medical advances, vet med is becoming harder. And so, if there's more to learn, there's more demand. Why would it logically be the case that you would work less today as a new vet versus 10 years ago? There's more to do. And there's positives and negatives of that. But I think with there being just more to do now as a vet, that combined with we're coming up in more generations of expecting a more work-life balance, that's my opinion of where this divide is. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you want to fight me? Am I wrong? Like, what are your thoughts on all of that? Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah, it makes sense. And circling back a bit, okay, so you said that it's going in the opposite direction of what it used to be. So if we look at the data, what has happened is that graduating DVMs, their weekly work expectations have actually dropped steadily really steadily since 2010, but especially since 2015, they've dropped by almost 20%. Those expectations of lower work hours are not being met, and so that's a piece of the puzzle. There's a lot of things that contribute to burnout, of course, for veterinarians, but that's a piece of the puzzle, right? That's one thing that I thought was a really interesting takeaway from the summit. And the other thing is, okay, that's a flip from what it used to be. And so 2019, interestingly enough, was the year that there was a flip. Back in 2015, for example, new grad vets thought they were going to be working more than what they actually worked. And I know 2017 was one that was kind of like more remarkable of a difference between those, where they thought they were going to be working more than they were actually working, versus now it's like they think that they're going to be working less, but they're actually working more. So I thought that was an interesting point too, is that it kind of flipped. And not only did it flip from what it was in the past, but it flipped in 2019. So I don't think we can completely blame COVID for that shift, even though probably COVID is certainly part of that shift because it did increase demand with everybody getting a COVID puppy, right?
Yeah, it's a great point. Is this shift happened, or you can see it already started to happen before COVID was the thing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I would agree. COVID probably just exacerbated or increased demand even further to cause even bigger increases in the difference in expectations versus reality. It's pretty nuts.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because these are averages. Of course, there are a lot of veterinarians out there who are working, more hours than what any of these surveys say.
Yeah, on to that point, I would argue that probably not just what you just said, that there's plenty of vets who are working above the quote average or the median, but the survey probably isn't catching all the hours worked anyway. So maybe the difference isn't actually 43 versus 48. It might be 48 versus 64, right? Or 63. The reason I say that is because is the survey, and this is nothing against the survey, it's just it'd be impossible to actually capture this, but I do know a lot of vets who take their work home with them. Mm-hmm. They're doing notes at home because if you saw 20 to 30 patients in a day, mm-hmm. and some people do more detailed notes than others, but like mm-hmm. if you had a really busy day and some emergencies came through, a lot of vets realistically don't have enough time to finish everything at the job, so they take it home. Callbacks on the weekend, notes, it is a thing that is very common for lots of different vets. Mm-hmm. And so my guess is a lot of vets are actually working more than that. There's just not tracking that time and it being put into a survey, which
Mhm.
is exacerbating even more burnout. If your expectations are different from reality and then turns out everything's even more work, yikes.
Mhm. When you're filling out a survey, but you're not, most vets are not, they're not tracking their hours.
Yeah.
These answers that were given on the survey are more likely to be lower than what they're actually working, right? The hours are, they're more likely to underreport than overreport those hours. And it's also, you have to be willing to admit to yourself and put it on the survey that you worked those hours. And if it's more than that, you might not be willing to do that.
Yeah, and it's in no other profession have I ever seen the line be blurred between like work time and not work time too. I feel like most vets are always on. Like if you end your shift at 6 p.m., but then you had this one question in the back of your head on this one case, and there's another
Mhm.
vet there that's more senior than you, and so you wanted to pick their brain, right?
Mhm.
And then one thing leads to another. You guys start nerding out for the next 45 minutes, and then you
Mhm.
don't leave until 7. Like, yeah, that was your choice, but also you wanted to do that because you had a burning question in the back of your head that you wanted to learn more about. It's like you are working, you're getting
Mhm.
better. I don't think any of that is in any of these surveys to begin with. And again, that's just the name of the profession, right? It's tough. I have my own take as far as potential solutions, but like, what do you think about this data? Is it a problem? Are there any solutions that people should think of in the back of their head? What do you think of this problem? And do you have any solutions? I can tell you mine, but
Okay, so a few thoughts there. One thing is just to realize that as the demand has increased, the options available to veterinarians have also increased at the same time. In some ways, you can kind of write your own ticket. Like, I know you had said when we were chatting before, David, something about, you're probably going to be working more as a new grad anyway, but eventually you're probably going to get to a point where you're going to be doing a little bit more boundary setting.
Mhm.
Maybe you even pivot to a role because you can write your ticket. Maybe you're even pivoting to a role where you're intentionally working less hours per week, either by taking on an associate role that is like 3 days a week instead of 4 or 5 days a week, or
Mhm.
working relief. There's a growing population of veterinarians who are self-employed, who are working relief shifts or developing a specific niche within VetNet and just working in that niche, for example. So there are a lot of different ways to do things. I have, over the course of my career, I've observed a lot of different veterinarians just, like if you think about, at some point you're going to start to think about, why am I working this hard?
Mhm.
And maybe you get to a point where you hit certain goals, right, with your lifestyle, or you meet certain financial milestones, like buying a house, for example, and getting settled in and that sort of thing. And maybe at some point you take a step back, or, maybe you start to set more of those boundaries, even if you're in the same role. What do you think about that?
Oh, I 100% agree. It's just inevitable now that most vets, I think, will come to a point where they'll realize, why am I can't keep on working this hard.
Mhm.
What are my options? Can I work less? And it's just
Mhm.
a matter of doing the math to see if you can or not. I have a controversial take, maybe controversial take, that trust me, I think you're going to agree with by the end of it. But if we're framing this discussion in the mindset of this is a problem, how do we fix it? Here's my controversial take for the new grad. I want to get your thoughts on this. I don't think it's actually a problem. I think it's only a problem if we frame it as a problem. What I mean by that is, when you're a new vet, you've already devoted yourself to becoming a doctor, right? So like you
Mhm.
already know and experience in vet school, it's a lot of work. And so the goal for most new vets are probably going to be learn as much as possible, become the best doctor possible. Typically, in my experience, that is what the
Mhm.
vast majority of new vets are thinking about, right? That is their actual goal. It's not to work the least amount possible, it's to be the best doctor.
Yes.
And so you shouldn't graduate with really any expectations of work hours, because for the most part, your work hours is determined by whatever it takes to become the best doctor possible, which is going to be 40 to 60 hours a week / whatever your employer honestly designates for you. You're not a practice owner. You're not 100% relief outside right when graduating, right? Nor should you be, probably. If you're graduating with you're a newbie doctor and your goal is to be best doctor possible, then there is no work-life balance. Do whatever needs to be done to learn as much as possible in the time frame that you want. That's it. And then you don't have to feel bad if you clock in a 50-hour week or a 60-hour week once. Yes, you're going to be tired, but I just don't think it's possible to become a kick-butt vet and not be tired at some point. And so there is no work-life balance. Recognize that and just know that it's for a season of your life. Because what I've also found is that the vet who's practiced for 2 years is completely different than the vet who's practiced for 3 months. Like, they might not feel like an expert at that point, because there is a lot of imposter syndrome going on in this field.
Just
nobody
a little
feels
bit,
like
David.
they're an just a little bit. You guys do not think as highly of yourselves as you should, in my opinion. But feelings aside, you're going to be in a totally different place with your ability to practice medicine 2+ years out versus day one. The solution to this is just realizing it's a race to do what you need to do to get to where you want to go as far as your medical-based knowledge and your ability to feel comfortable with different procedures, surgeries, if you want to get into that, all that kind of stuff. Because then after year 2, really, if you've done the grinding needed, you can write your own ticket. Like, you have a lot more power than I think you might expect. You could, and because of the increased demand, like, vets are making more now than they did 5 years ago. As long as you keep your financial life in the right direction, with the main goal being just being the best doctor as possible, there will come a point where you could relieve full-time if you wanted to. You could take the associate position that works 2 or 3 days a week, not 4. And your finances could totally take it. And now you'll be a lot more happy. I guess to tie a bow on this is to say it's not a problem. It's just recognize at the front end, what are the goals and what do you need to do to get to where you want to go? And then you could take your foot off the gas after a certain point to prioritize something else. If you phrase it like that, I don't see where there's the problem, other than you'll be tired at some points, but like, that's life.
Right. Yeah. And I like what you said about, yeah, I like what you said about different seasons. That is what showed up in the data as well. So what they were showing at the AVMA Business and Economic Forum, so they had data showing that up until around age 30, 31, those vets were working more than vets who were between age 32 and age 55. And that was over a long span of time that they had gathered this data that was based on veterinarians at different ages. And of course, I mean, there's going to be vets who graduate from vet school at a later age, right? So, I mean, it's not necessarily accounting for that. But if we're just looking at by age, then the younger vets were working more. You asked about solutions earlier. And so let's talk about some of the more systemic solutions that may be in the pipeline. So one of the things that was interesting is they were talking about that there's about, I believe it's 13 more vet schools that are undergoing the accreditation process currently. And usually when that accreditation process starts, most schools are going to actually complete it. And some schools just take longer than others. So we probably have 13 more vet schools coming.
That's a big difference, actually. Like, it'll take some time, but that is difference. Huge. That's like 40% more vet schools eventually.
Yes. It's quite a lot more vet schools. And in addition to that, over the last decade, some vet schools have increased their class sizes as well. And so there was a lot of talk, especially toward the beginning of the pandemic, of, okay, the demand is up. And we already knew, of course, that the baby boomers would be retiring. Are we going to have enough vets to serve the population, right? The animal and pet population, especially. There are some more recent estimates that show that with these additional vet schools opening and some other changes, there may be enough vets to keep up with future demand, even though previous reports had said that there wouldn't be enough vets. I don't think we've got a final answer on that, but there's at least a little bit more information out there that may be a potential solution. Another thing to just keep in mind is, there are more options in vet med out there right now than ever before, right? So we've said a couple times during this, you can write your own ticket. It's true. Whether it's by asking for what you want in your current position. We talk to a lot of clients about that, right?
Yeah. And I think it comes back to, again, just reframing the mindset. Because like you said, you can write your own ticket. What does that mean? We'll take advantage of the fact that maybe you see the additional 13 or so vet schools going out under accreditation as like a relief for yourself. But honestly, I'd see that as, the demand is highest now. Take advantage of that. Capitalize on that. And write your own ticket means in this time of uncomfortably high demand, that's when you can get to a point where you can relief 100% and choose your own work hours. You can go back to the, if a practice really likes working with you, but you don't want to work 4 days a week, see if you can work 3. I see it all the time. So as you can see, demand for veterinary medicine is at a all-time high, and the result has led to a discrepancy between reality and expectations. And with that comes even more widespread burnout, right? With burnout comes less time and energy to make sure that your finances are working even harder than you are, which is the best prescription for burnout in the first place. So I guess I don't want to frame this as there needs to be a solution, but if you do want to frame it as that, the solution really is become the best doctor possible, but also get a grasp on your finances. Because if you can do both, then you'll be in a position where you can financially be like, I did the math. I can work 3 days a week now. Oh my gosh, let's do it. And then don't wait, because I think a lot of people get to that point sooner than they expected, or like they got to that point, but they didn't do the math. And so they worked an extra year killing themselves when they didn't actually have to. And so what if you could get fiduciary veterinary specific financial planning that is student loan aware, that could change your life for a price much better than you ever dreamed possible? And if that sounds good to you, go to slpwealth.com/vet for a free 15-minute intro call to see if we could be a good fit for you. Because burnout is a real thing. And I think this whole expectation versus reality is just one of the many variables that leads to more burnout. But if more vets had a good co-pilot behind them that could help them do the math, figure out where they need to go, or what do they need to do with their finances to get to that place, probably a lot more vets could work less sooner. And that'd be way more sustainable in the long run.
Until next time, take care and continue your path to financial success.
This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered individualized financial advice.
If a specific investment is mentioned, it should not be considered a recommendation or endorsement to buy or sell the investment.
All investments involve risk.
Past performance does not guarantee future results.
You are encouraged to seek the advice of a financial professional before implementing any investment strategies discussed.
Yay, compliance.